Hi, we're now live on Facebook, waiting for all of you who want to tune in to hear for our presentation tonight. We'll give you guys a couple more minutes to get settled and get comfortable before we begin. We'll be beginning soon, so just stay tuned with us. I know it was hard finding a comfortable spot in my house with some quiet, so we'll just give you a chance so you can all find that spot also, and then we'll begin. Maybe we'll do another 2 minutes. You think that sounds good? And then shoot a 3 minutes and we can start to get started.
Great.
All right, maybe about another minute and then we'll get ready to begin. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
We're so excited for all of you that are joining us live tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're all ready to begin. Thank you so much again for joining us tonight. I want to welcome you tonight to Click with JFCS. We're so excited to bring you this programming. It's our way of helping you, our community, stay connected to JFCS during these difficult times. We have online programming for you, activities and advice, and JFCS will be there for you through Click with JFCS. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Paula Goldstein, our President and CEO, and Paya Eisenberg, our Senior Vice President of Community Engagement. I'm Stacey Pearlman, and I'll be with you tonight. I am honored that I was asked to help lead this crucial discussion. We're going to provide so much great information for you tonight. I'm going to be joined by Sarah Waxman and Deborah Bornstein. Deb is our Director of Donor and Event Operations, and she's going to be here monitoring all your questions and your comments. So we really invite you to participate with our discussion, and then Deb will be helping us, hear what you guys are responding to or you want to hear as well. And Sarah Waxman, we're so lucky she's with us tonight. Sarah's a family life education associate and a clinical social worker at JFCS. Sarah works in private practice as well, and she specializes in working with adults in the treatment of trauma, depression, and anxiety. And she does this all while raising 2 young children as well. So tonight, we thought it was important if we talked to you about managing all the parental and children anxiety during this COVID-19 pandemic. We are navigating through unprecedented times. As adults and our children were experiencing fear and anxiety and uncertainty. And Sarah's going to help us tonight, guide us through this crisis and provide us with tools to help us manage and support our own anxiety and the issues that our children are experiencing as well. So Sarah, just, I was thinking about where do we begin? Because there is so much that we're all experiencing right now. And, I think from the start, we should just talk about the trauma that we are
Mm-hmm.
experiencing and what we're going to do for our kids to help them endure this trauma and then get into how they're going to successfully cope. So, Sarah, I
Yeah.
turn it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Great, Stacey. And I'm glad that you named it in that way, because I think that the word trauma can often, for a lot of people, just be a very scary word. It has a very negative connotation to it, where people immediately think it equals a negative, potentially lifelong lasting impact. And I want to just put out there for everyone to think about trauma in a different way, and just name that I think what we can think of as trauma right now is something that is too much too fast, which is exactly what is happening now and what we're all experiencing. We're experiencing on a collective level and on an individual level something that is too much too fast. And so creating the emotions that you just described: uncertainty, anxiety, fear. I would add in being overwhelmed and exhaustion, doubt. I mean,
For
so
sure.
many hard emotions. Yeah. And so there is that. But I wanted to also say that the other side of trauma is this idea of resiliency. And that I think people often think that if you experience trauma, it's going to also equal one outcome. And that's not always the case. Depending on what protective factors might already be in place in your life, coping skills, other support, a whole host of things that may protect against like a long lasting impact, that can be kind of your defense against the negative impact of trauma. And so what I want to talk about tonight is the idea of fostering resiliency in the face of what we're experiencing in this trauma right now, both for ourselves as individuals and as families, because it is possible to, do that in the face of this collective and individual trauma that we are experiencing. And so we're going to talk about how to do that.
Yeah, I would say we definitely need some of these tools. I think that, on a day-to-day basis, we all have these roles we're in separately, whether it's a wife, a mother, a spouse, an employee. But now we're at home and we're compounding all those roles all at the same time, trying to be there for every, one in our family. And, I think that as adults, we can use some tools. And then I think we need to talk about how we should be helping our children to cope as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, any tools that you can help us to start fostering resiliency, I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Absolutely. And so I want to start off just by touching upon three different, more kind of concepts or ideas that I think that parents, the adults in all of the family systems that are now home together all of the time right now, can kind of keep in mind for yourself to help you start thinking about, how am I going to craft an environment of resiliency right now. So the first thing that I want to say to parents is that I would encourage you to let go of expectations that you had or probably still have for yourself and your children, and your family, and just allowing that to be okay, accepting that as the new normal, to just lower your bar, and be really gentle with yourself for it. I think that old expectations about what we had for ourselves in the face of what we're experiencing right now just don't fit what's happening day to day and what's happening in the short and long-term future. So if we can really be gentle with ourselves, lower those expectations, and also model that for our kids, I think that can be really helpful. And I want to add a piece to that about the role that parents are currently finding themselves in at home, now having to play a dual role, both as parent and teacher to their kids. Because a thing that I'm hearing a lot about is that there's a lot of pressure, a lot of guilt, and a lot of anxiety that parents are now feeling about having to now be an educator for their children. And I want to put out there that this is something that happened overnight, very suddenly, that nobody really could prepare or plan for. And so both educators and parents are now kind of trying to figure this all out overnight and figure it out day by day. And everybody's just doing the best they can. Nobody's doing it right. Nobody's doing it perfectly. Everyone is just trying to figure this out. And, I think an interesting thing to also keep in mind is that there really is a healthy boundary between home life and school life that has now disappeared.
Yes.
I was telling, Stacey last night that actually I've been watching a lot of Sesame Street with my 3-year-old at home. And there's this song that Ed Sheeran sings with Elmo about home and school life that I think really captures this very well. He sings about how at school, there's all of this structure, right? And there's like a expectation and like social pressure and environment that like you raise your hand and you walk in lines and you do this lesson here and have recess here and all this structure. And home is a place where you get to do whatever you like and you can yell at mom and then give her a hug the next second. And it's a place you can kind of de-stress and unwind. And now all those boundaries are being violated. We're being asked to bring that school environment into our homes. And that's really, really hard. And the other piece I want to say about that too is that, I've heard people talking about this now being homeschooling our kids, and that this is also not homeschooling. When a family makes a decision to homeschool their children, they have a lot of support around that. They have a lot of time to prepare and plan for that. They can really think about what curriculum, what style of education fits my family, fits my kid and their unique learning style. And they also have ways to go outside, to go to meetups, go to the playground, go on field trips. And so none of that is possible right now. What we're doing is not homeschooling. So I say all of that to give parents license to be kind to yourself, to decrease that pressure, and just, we're all doing the best that we can. So
I think we all need that. I think that feels so good to hear, because I think we are ridden with guilt and even comparison, talking to friends. What are they getting done with their kids? And, how much work is their kid doing a day? And what if my kid doesn't finish everything in a day? So I think that's really nice to hear, that you're giving us permission to be gentle on ourselves and remember that, this was sprung upon all of us. So we're all doing a great job.
Yeah. Absolutely, Stacey. And to that end, I want the next kind of overarching idea I wanted to put out there is to just encourage families to acknowledge and openly talk about your feelings as much as you can right now. And in going back to this idea of fostering resiliency in the face of what we're experiencing for yourselves and for your family. And I actually read an article the other day by a psychologist named Dr. Abigail Romorowski, who works at the Ross Center that has locations in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And the title of the article was "Keep Calm and Snuggle On." And I loved it. And I loved it. And she is a psychologist that practices a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically operates from the understanding of how our thoughts, our actions and behaviors, and our feelings all affect each other. And I recreated a diagram that she put in the article because I thought it'd be really helpful to show everybody. So I'm going to put that up right now, make sure I get it into the screen. And basically what this shows you is that, underneath the parent and the child, you can see how, in basically a triangle format, what we think and what we do in terms of our behavior, our actions, and what we feel are all interconnected, and they all affect each other. But also what I loved about this diagram is it breaks down not only what happens individually for the child and the parent, but also what happens in the family system. If you see the arrows in red, it shows how the behavior of the parent is influencing the feelings of the child, and that the behavior of the child is also influencing the feelings of the parent. And I think in reaction to what's happened, there's been a lot of anxious thoughts that are coming up for people. And in response, people are going to trying to control behaviors, control action, and in a sense, maybe even try to over control to manage their anxiety, kind of the schedule, and, trying to create these perfect environments in terms of what you're doing. And while that makes sense, kind of in an immediate response to a crisis like we're facing, I think what we actually all need is to come back to a place of focusing on feelings, and giving much more space to kind of acknowledging, what is hard about this situation, what is coming up for yourself individually and for your children, and allowing yourself to be okay with the fact that you can focus on that much more than anything else. And you can focus on like the basic needs of your family right now, and what you need to do to survive financially, and just kind of get through this time and what that feels like, and worry about everything else later, because we're all going through it at the same time. Like this is not a unique experience in your family, it's happening for everybody, and that's what we're all going through. So that's the second idea.
And is there, sorry, I just meant to ask, and just touching base on this, when you said we should be opening and talking about feelings, assuming we're talking maybe like, 15 and under, 13 and under, is there a different way we should be addressing our younger children versus our older? And how, I think we're confused about how much should we be sharing, and I can go on and on. And if they don't have feelings, are we trying to solicit and elicit from them? How are you doing with this? So if you could just touch a little more, when you said we should talk about how we're feeling, what are some boundaries or tips about the age, with the age grouping?
Absolutely. If you wouldn't mind, Stacey, I think that the kind of concrete tips that I cover are going to cover what you just asked in some sense. So I think what I'll do is just give this third point, go through those tips, and then we'll come back to that. Whatever I didn't cover, I'll just answer. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And then just the other overarching idea I just wanted to give to parents was to try to ignore the productivity pressure. I think that this pressure is coming from a sense of trying to cling to what is normal in a time where things are just not normal. And, coming from a place of denying a very simple fact, but something that's very hard to digest, is that on the other side of this, things are going to be forever changed in ways we don't know yet, but it's inevitable. This is an event we can compare to something like a world war or 9/11, where on the other side of this, like, things are going to look different. And so I think, social media really makes you think that everybody else is figuring it out and, being really productive and clinging to this sense of like routine and what life was like before. I think in the beginning, we saw a lot of people with these color-coded rainbow schedules for everyone's day. And
beautiful, we're getting scavenger hunts were happening, and cooking
and we're
projects.
getting to, a point where we realize that's just not really possible in reality. And so as much as we can kind of ignore the pressure to stay that productive and come back to a more simple state in crisis, I think that will be helpful. So that's the third takeaway I wanted to do. Okay, so going to your question about what do we do? How do we acknowledge feelings? Like, how do we handle this sensitively? And depending on the age, how does that look different? I have a list of just some like key things that I think people can do day to day in their families for themselves and with their kids that I think will help with that. And then we can come back to anything that you feel I didn't miss. Sarah. Questions.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the first thing that I want to put out there is to encourage families to limit the intake of news for yourself and your children. And I want to note that this is not an encouragement to stay in denial, because there's a difference between denial and distraction. Denial would be putting your fingers in your ears and just like not even paying attention and not wanting to know. Distraction is a healthy coping mechanism where you are just taking something that you're acknowledging, but is also hard and overwhelming or whatever, and choosing to put it on the shelf for the moment, to do something else and come back to it when you can handle it, or when is appropriate, or when is necessary. So there's that piece. And, families might want to try to have a check-in with your kids once or twice a day to talk about updates, to talk about the virus, but to really find a limit for your family that feels right for you. And I would really encourage parents that if you feel like you personally need more updates during the day, to find a way to silently do that. Check on your phone, not on the TV where the kids can also kind of see the screen and hear it, to find a way to limit that. Another thing is to keep an emotional thermometer or barometer on yourself and your kids. Take a stock of where your difficult emotions are. Is your anxiety at a 1 or a 10, 10 being the highest? And know that really you're going to be able to access your thinking, more rational brain when it's a 5 or lower. So if you're at an 8 to 10, or you think your kid is at an 8 or a 10, realize in those moments, rational thought's not really going to help. You kind of got to go through the peak of the emotion before you can come back to that place. Third thing, be mindful of what conversations you're having in front of your kids. Kids are really astute eavesdroppers and observers, and they're going to pick up on things that you might not even realize they're picking up on. I was driving by my son's daycare with him during the first week of this, actually. And he made a comment all of a sudden after we passed it that school was over, not closed, but that it was over. And I was just shocked that that's something that he said. So you want to be mindful of where you're having conversations about things. Unless you're physically in another room with the door shut, they're going to be picking up some sort of data from you. Their developmental stage is going to influence what they're picking up from you. But you just want to be careful. And especially if you're having conversations about food shortages or financial worries, to just really be mindful of where you're talking and when you're talking about those things.
Really good point. I think sometimes we're all guilty of thinking the kids aren't listening or in their other room, and they do seem to pick up on everything.
Yes. And I'll say too that, we're in a situation where you're now home all the time with your kids. And so this is just like an ideal. There are going to be times where you just might not be able to do that. And you can only control so much. So, also be gentle with yourself about that too, because you're all at home together all the time. So another thing is that kids need clarity and reassurance. You can and should acknowledge the reality of what is happening, but you also want to provide reassurance and positive and helpful things that are happening as well. One example I can give with this is that when you're talking with kids about the virus, you can also talk about the immune system. And for young kids, you can talk about the immune system being something like you have a superhero or superheroes inside of you that can fight off disease, but that some people have less superheroes, like the elderly population or people who have other illnesses already, that they don't have as many superheroes. And so we're staying home right now to protect ourselves, but to also keep other people safe, who don't have as many superheroes as you do, or that
such
a
great dialogue. It's really helpful.
Yeah. Another thing is to establish a routine, but with flexibility. And I would say establishing a routine for your family that works. Some families, you have a parent who might not be working. Some families may have a single parent. Some families may have both parents working. And so the routine for different family structures is going to look different, but having some sort of semblance of that, I think is going to help everybody feel secure at this time, but also having flexibility with that, knowing maybe day to day, week to week, there's some trial and error and you're figuring this thing out. So it's okay to adjust as well. You may want to include or assign your kids responsibilities that they normally didn't have time for. Tell your kids we're all in this together as a family. Play High School Musical for them if that works. And have them start doing things with you that they normally wouldn't. My 3-year-old all of a sudden is really into laundry. And so he's helping me take the laundry out of the dryer every day. It's adorable. Because he's home and sees that all the time now. Yeah,
the chores, because we're all just constantly cleaning and loading and unloading dishes. And yes, now my boys know they are fully participating in that.
Yeah. I would say also take cues from your kid and respond accordingly. On the one hand, like you mentioned earlier, Stacey, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, they're in different places developmentally. So the suggestions and tools I'm talking about are going to look different depending on their age. However, not every 5-year-old is the same as another 5-year-old. And so what I say to parents is that you know your kids best. You are the expert on your child. And so really tuning into what you think is going to work for them. Some kids may find this time really boring, and some kids are loving it. Some kids are going to need a little more update from you about the news than others because that works for them. And you also may have different kids that have different needs. And so I think, responding to your kids is important. And I wanted to also note that, kids who are particularly anxious or stressed right now are going to need to be told that there's kid worries and adult worries. So it's going to be your child's job to wash their hands, but it's the parent's job to provide the soap in order to do so and to overall keep them safe, kind of reassuring them,
Such
the
good
roles.
tips. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say to parents is to minimize the sarcasm and dry humor. That may be something that works for you in adult time, but I would try to minimize that around your children. Also supporting your kids and connecting with friends and loved ones virtually, even if they're young, 3, 2 years old. It doesn't replace meeting in person, but finding ways for them to stay socially connected is great. Also finding ways for each family member to reduce stress. And there's a lot of ideas that are going around about, what are good tools for reducing stress and anxiety. And if there's questions about specifics, I'm happy to go into them. But I would say finding what works for you in the situation as an individual and as a family, if that's going for a walk or, doing yoga together or taking a bath or doing a breathing exercise, whatever it is, to bring those into your day.
And I find also saying like, I need alone time, and then saying to my husband, like, when can I provide you with some alone time? And even to my kids, because what's so nice is we've been doing so much together, but saying to my older one who's 13, you want to go in your room and close the door and, get on House Party, that app with his friends for a little bit, like you're entitled to do that as well.
Yeah. Great point, Stacey. I love that. Yes. The other thing, a few final things, just 3 more points, and then we can go to the questions. But I would say creating new family rituals. Perhaps if you want to do something like an evening check-in where you have the same 3 questions everybody answers every day. You could do something like, right now I feel something good about today was, something hard about today was. That. If you do that every day, just checking in with those 3 simple questions. And you asked earlier about the different ages of kids, right? So for younger kids who don't have the language to talk about their emotions, you could hold up images of faces that communicate the emotion and have the kid point to, I feel this, type of thing. And then, finding ways to positively reframe things. There's a lot of hard things about the situation, but there also could be a lot of things that are good, that are positive, that are happening for you or your family. So coming back to that as well, finding those silver linings. And then the final piece is I'm going to say is reaching out for mental health support. The mental health community of clinicians and therapists and social workers and people that provide that support on an ongoing basis are really rallying and trying to provide that support for people through virtual avenues. And it's so available right now. And there's a lot of insurance companies that are waiving copays, waiving fees for mental health services right now. And so I would just encourage people to take advantage of that for you as a family, as an adult, or your kids. And if you really feel like you want that individualized attention, go for it. I mean, now is the time, if anything, to push into that support. And at the end of this presentation, we'll actually have a slide up with information about how you can contact JFCS to reach our care navigation department, and they could help guide you to the right support for you. So that information will be available also.
That's great. And I hope some of the things, if you saw me looking to the side, I was even taking notes on some of the things you were talking about, because I love you give us like real tangible, easy tools, not ones we have to spend a lot of time thinking and planning, which is hard also, but I feel like you really gave us things that we can start using as soon as tonight. And you're just a wealth of information. So I think
I'm
we
glad.
all appreciate that so much, Sarah. So thank you
You're
for
welcome.
that. And I'm going to now turn it over to Deb and see if any comments or questions have been coming in that we can help you answer while we still have Sarah here.
So we've just had a lot of like, people love the Elmo song that you said. We'll put a link to that on our Facebook.
Sure. Yeah.
We did have a comment that one person had said that it's really a privilege to get alone time in the house when, with kids. So it's something that, we all look for. I mean, I do have a couple questions here that we received previously. The first one is, you covered some, that many parents are balancing work, their jobs, becoming teacher. Oh, we talked about that. Hold on one second. I'm just going through what we had received earlier today. Here's one. My toddler seems more bored, less energetic, and easily frustrated right now. How do I navigate this? How do I talk to my young child about their feelings?
Mm-hmm. Great. So, one of the things that I would say is that everything that you just described, I think for a toddler is a normal reaction to this experience. And I actually would just suggest to those parents, and I am really trying to take this advice to myself, to just let it be, to tell yourself like, it's okay for my toddler to be bored sometimes. It's okay for them to get frustrated, because that is their way of communicating their response to what's happening. And, trying to remain as calm and regulated as you can with that. And I put that out there as a tool for helping you kind of just like stay as calm as possible while they get out their emotions in the way that they can. So there's that piece. And then what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
How do I talk to my young child about their feelings?
Yeah.
I feel like you covered.
I like that with the pictures.
With the pictures.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
What about the child that tends to retreat and not share their feelings?
Yeah. And when you say that, Deb, immediately what comes to mind is a teenager, but that could be younger than that too. But I would say it's a balancing act, right? I think when I go back to the idea of like modeling that it's okay to talk about emotions, I would say don't shy away from just acknowledging that you're observing that behavior. Saying, I'm here to talk to you if you want. It seems to me like you might be feeling X, Y, and Z. Is that true? And you still may get no response and they still may retreat. But I think just continuing to like model that it's okay to talk, or that you're willing to talk, or even saying like, I see that you don't want to talk right now, but when you do, if you do, I'm here and would love to talk to you. And that's, all you can do.
I agree. What about here? I have a couple more here. Let's see here. I'm worried about my child being more isolated and not interacting with their peers anymore now that we are just home all day, every day. What can I do to help?
Yeah. So I think the piece, I said about trying to help them connect virtually to people outside the home, which I think is one of the only avenues we really have right now to do that, other than maybe like some drive-bys waving through a window in the car, which could be something you could do at a safe social distance, to like see people that you miss, although different people at different comfort levels with that. But another thing I would say about kind of like the worry over that is that your child's not the only one experiencing that. We're all going through that right now. All kids are going through that right now. And you can also think about the fact that like they're home with you. And if they're also home with siblings, like those are other people that they're in the house with. And so they're not truly alone. So that's like an important piece to remember as well. And here's an opportunity perhaps for like just during this time for those relationships to strengthen. Like, I wonder how siblings, their relationships are probably being strained right now, but they also might be strengthened in a lot of ways too from this experience. So just keeping in mind that there's like other ways to think about it as well in terms of the isolation.
That is great. I'm just trying to, I see another comment is just about, it's coming through. Hold on one second. Here we go.
Sure.
Okay, how do I get my 8-year-old child to focus on school assignments at home when there are so many distractions?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that that's incredibly challenging. And, I would go back to the idea of like doing the best I can in terms of thinking about your kid and the way that your house and your family life is structured right now. And again, like kind of doing the best you can. So like maybe finding way and keeping that bar of expectation lower than you would think. So like not trying to achieve full, not distracted all day long, but if they're this distracted now, maybe the goal would be for the next day or the next week to just increase the focus by this much. If they can't focus for 4 subjects, can I get them to focus for 1 or half of 1, and trying different strategies, and just know there's going to be a lot of trial and error in this. And also that like, you're not the only family that's facing that. And on the other side of this, there's going to be a lot of like kids that didn't get everything done that they would have if school started, and we're all going to be catching up as a society together. So again, doing the best that you can, and maybe some trial and error, and like trying to increase it, but also know it's okay if you're doing the best you can. I don't know if
that's all we can do. It's all we can do.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I find, my friends in different school districts, even my family in Jersey, the teachers are so understanding right now. And I think I would say communicating with them as well, because they want to know what's going on at home, I find. And I think you feel a little better. It takes some of the pressure off of you if you're communicating with the teacher, even to just hear them say, don't worry about it. Then let them just do math today and not focus on language arts. It's okay. So I would also say communicate with the teacher as well. You don't have to bear this alone.
And that's a great point, Stacey. And you can also ask the teachers, like, what strategies do you use at school? What do you think might work at home that like works with my kid when you're with them? And maybe that'll help. Yeah.
That's all the questions that I've received. So I think that's good.
Sarah, we're going to need you when the kids go back to school saying, how do we get them off the video? How do we get them back into routine? And we're going to need you to help us put them back into our rightful routine again.
Oh, and Stacey, that brings me, Deb, do we have time for me to say one more thing?
For sure.
That brings me back to this idea that I keep hearing people talking about us being in the new normal now. And I do think that, yes, we are in some state of that, but really we're more in a crisis mode. And the new normal is going to be on the other side of this. And we don't know what that is just yet, but we are adapting to this situation. And when we get to the other side, we will also readapt then too, together. And we'll talk about that and figure that out then.
Oh, that feels good to hear and to remind ourselves. I think that's a nice way to end, remembering that we will get through this together and we will have a new normal again one day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Really, you provided such great information.
My pleasure.
So thank you.
Thank you,
so
Stacey. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm going to share the information in case anybody's looking for services or assistance from Jewish Family and Children's Service. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
And stay tuned to Click with JFCS. We'll be bringing you lots more.